everybody? I'm back. And there's another question that I've been thinking about. It's been coming up at the beach, talking about it with other riders. And the question is, has windfoiling replaced windsurfing? So my direct answer is no, absolutely not. But we're going to spend this video to talk about it because there's a lot of advantages to windfoiling and there's a lot of advantages to windsurfing. There's advantages and disadvantages to both, and I want to hear what you guys think as well. So in the comments down below, please share your thoughts. It helps me to learn from you guys. So the first thing I'll bring up about why I don't think windfoiling is going to replace windsurfing is because windsurfing is rooted. It's been around since the 70s. It really got rooted in the 80s. Things like kite surfing, kiteboarding came along. It took people away from windsurfing, but it still stayed rooted. The manufacturers are coming out with new windsurfing boards every single year. The sail manufacturers are coming out with new sails every single year. It just doesn't look to me like windsurfing is gonna go away. It does not look like windfoiling is gonna replace windsurfing. And aside from manufacturers still providing a lot of windsurfing gear, there's all the competitions that are still out there. You've got wave competitions, you've got slalom competitions, you've got freestyle competitions all over the world for windsurfing. Now they may be coming smaller venues because windfoiling and kite surfing and all of those venues are taking away from windsurfing venue, but windsurfing is deeply rooted. So as it may not have as many participants, I don't think it's going away. Look a few years back when kite surfing was introduced to the Olympics and it bumped windsurfing out. But then, a couple years later, windsurfing was reintroduced. Now we may see windfoiling bump out windsurfing again. In fact, I think that's pretty likely, but I don't think windsurfing is going to go away completely. I think we'll see it come back and get another round in the Olympics. But it may go back and forth like this. When windsurfing came out, surfing didn't go anywhere. There's still millions of surfers in the world today. And I'm not saying that windsurfing is as well rooted as surfing, but windsurfing certainly has some strong roots. Now, I will say that I think windfoiling is going to take some people away from windsurfing, but I think for a lot of people, it's just going to add to their windsurfing. The windfoiling is going to give them more options to their windsurfing. Windsurfing and windfoiling go so well together because I can go out on a 4.7 and it might be blowing 15 miles an hour, maybe even gusting up to 18, and I'm real happy on my 4.7. And I can use that exact same 4.7 on my 85-liter windsurfing board when it's blowing 25 miles an hour, maybe 22 to 23 knots, and have a great session there. And so you can use the two sports together. If it's not blowing that hard, you can windfoil. If it's blowing real hard, you can windsurf. And there's some crossover there too. So I hear some people at the beach and they'll say, well, windsurfing is less expensive than windfoiling because you don't have to buy that big expensive foil. And windsurfing is less gear than windfoiling because you don't have the foil. Well, that's partially true, but it's partially not true also. And think of it this way. When you're windfoiling, your sail quiver is less. When I'm windfoiling, my sail quiver is basically 4.7, 3.7, and 2.7. For windsurfing, my quiver is 5.3, 4.7, 4.2, 3.7, 3.3, 2.9, 2.7. That's twice the number of sails, more than twice the number of sails. Now, I really have not been using the 5.3 this year, so we could probably take that out of the mix. But still, 4.7 to 2.7, and a lot of different sizes in between means you actually do have a larger quiver for windsurfing. Now, it's hard to argue the expense of buying a foil because the foil itself is expensive. So you need to add on $1,000 to $2,000 for foil, depending on which one you get and how many wings and accessories you want with it and so on and so forth. So there is the extra cost to the foil, which is possibly an advantage to windsurfing. You don't have to store the foil, you don't have to transport the foil, and you don't have to pay the extra money for a foil. So as I said, there's advantages and there's disadvantages to both. And with windsurfing, it's definitely easier to get the gear into the water. It's easier to get the gear out of the water with windsurfing. With windfoiling, it can be challenging. getting that gear into the water, especially if there's waves, and you do have to be careful the waves don't tip the board over and the wing hits you in the head, so I always wear a helmet. So yes, it is more cumbersome to windfoil than it is to windsurf. But there's a lot of other advantages to windfoiling. The biggest one that comes to mind is that you can do it in lighter winds. The biggest sail I'm using for windfoiling is a 4.7, and I can go in 14 miles an hour, which is, what's that, about 12 knots or so, all the way up to 30 miles an hour plus with a 2.7 meter sail. So you do have a lot of wind range with windfoiling, but specifically you can do it in the lower wind ranges, and you can have fun on small waves. It's another major advantage of windfoiling. So we're going to go back and forth with the advantages and disadvantages of both windsurfing and windfoiling. And with windsurfing, it's really hard to convince me that you can have the same slash and slay experience on a windfoil. You just can't. When you're on a windsurfing board in waves and you hit that lip and you pop that backside top turn and you throw a load of spray, you're just not going to tell me that you can have that same experience windfoiling. Now don't get me wrong, windfoiling, windsurf wave foiling is phenomenal. I love being on my big foil on small waves, medium-sized waves, just riding that swell back and forth, doing cutbacks, but it's not the same slash and spray experience as you're going to have windsurfing. One of the neat things about the windfoil is that it's silent. You can be going along at 20 miles an hour and you don't hear anything. It's a fantastic experience, and that's something that appeals to a lot of people. In addition to that, you don't have the bam, 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 bam when you're in the chop, because you're above the chop and you're just floating. So that makes it a lot easier on the body. And speaking of being easier on the body, that sail is practically weightless in your hands. So if you've got some shoulder issues, elbows, wrists, hand issues, neck, back issues, if you're 75, 80 years old, if you're 45 years old and you're getting tired from windsurfing, windfoiling is a heck of a lot easier on your body. Doesn't take as many days to recover. You can do longer sessions. That's a big advantage to windfoiling in my eyes. Now there is the danger aspect. With windfoiling, you do have that big foil underwater. And if you're in big winds, or if you're doing jumps, or if you're in breaking waves, there is a danger that you're going to get hit with that foil. And a lot of people are afraid of that. And so they stick with windsurfing. My wife and I were afraid of that before we got into windsurf wave foiling. We were worried about getting hit with that foil. So we started out slow. We started in the lower winds. We didn't go in big waves. And then we've progressed little by little. We're still not in big waves, but we like to go out in medium-sized swell. We like to go out when it's 25 to 30 miles an hour now. Before, when we first started, it was only a 15 to 20 mile an hour thing. But you do have to use some caution. So I can certainly understand that some people are discouraged from windfoiling because they're a little bit afraid. They're safety conscious. But give it a chance. It's not nearly as dangerous as my wife and I thought. We haven't gotten hurt at all. I haven't even bumped my shin on the foil yet. And gosh, I've had over 40 sessions on the thing. So it's really not as dangerous as some people make it out to be. Another advantage of windfoiling is you can go to locations that you thought were crappy locations for windsurfing, because maybe there's a wind line and you have to slog out and get to the wind line that's way out, and if you're on your 85 liter board or even 105 liter board, it just doesn't look like any fun. You can't even water start if you fall in. You got to swim back to shore. But with windfoiling, you can uphaul, you can slog out with a 3.3 meter sail. You get to the wind line, boop, you're up on plane, you're foiling, you catch some nice swell. You can turn crappy locations that you hated for windsurfing into some of your favorite locations. And by the way, you can also blast upwind. You've got that long mast beneath your board. You can use that as a keel and blast upwind. It gives you a lot more options as far as checking out different bays and coves. It just gives you much greater ability to stay safe, stay upwind, and just have fun. Now some people say, well, windsurfing you can go faster because you don't have as much drag as if you have your rig rigged right. You just have the tail of the board in the water, and if you have a proper fin, you really don't have much resistance. With the foil, you've got the wing underwater, you've got the long mast, you've got more resistance. Well, that might be true if you're racing I've seen comparisons showing that windsurfing can be faster in the gusts, but when you get a big lull on your windsurfer, you slow down right away. When you're on the foil, you get a big lull, just sheet it in a little bit and keep going. You don't slow down hardly at all. If you do slow down, you give the sail a couple pumps, give the foil a couple pumps, and you're back going just as fast as you were before. So I don't buy the argument that windsurfing is necessarily faster. It may be in the gust, but windfoiling is going to make up for it in the lulls. It's hard to give up that feeling of being on the water when you're windsurfing, and that's one of the reasons that I don't think windsurfing is going to go away. It's rooted for people to want to experience that feel of pushing the water, the sound of pushing the water. Surfers love to be in the surf. Windsurfers love to be in the surf. They like being on top of the surf too on a foil, but we windsurfers really like to be in the surf. So again, it is rooted, and I don't see windsurfing going away. And I will say, it is difficult to windfoil in very shallow water. Windsurfing, you can windsurf in shallow water. I live in the United States, in New York State, and every April we travel down to North Carolina to the Outer Banks, and sometimes we like to windsurf in the ocean, but a lot of times we like to windsurf in the Sound. And the Sound can be very, very shallow. There's a lot of spots that are a foot deep or less, and you can have a great time on a windsurfing board. But foiling, it's not going to work. Now, windsurfing may be a simpler option for beginners, because when you're a beginner, you have enough to worry about. You've got to learn how to put the sail together, you've got to learn how to thread the pulleys for the downhaul, how much downhaul to give it, then you got to have someone teach you what outhaul means, then you've got to get the board together, you've got to attach the board, figure out how to get this contraption in the water. If you remember back to when you were a beginner, that stuff's not all that easy. If you add a foil onto all that, it's just one more thing for people to have to learn about and deal with when they're learning. So I think we're going to see windsurfing stick around for beginners as well. There's no reason you can't try a foil as a beginner, but I think it complicates things. And you know, these are not all of the advantages and disadvantages of windsurfing versus windfoiling. So please, in the comment section down below, I would really appreciate it if you would share your thoughts on this topic and let us know what you see as some of the advantages and disadvantages of both windsurfing and windfoiling. And by the way, please click the subscribe button down below as well. And that way you'll receive notifications when new videos come out. I'm really trying to expand this channel, and your subscription makes a big difference. So thank you. See you next time. Look at this windsurfer, 120 pounds, without a 2.9 meter sail, getting it done.